My name is Evelyn and I am 72 years old. My boy, David, was my entire universe. His father, bless his soul, passed when David was just a toddler, leaving me to navigate this world as a single mother. I was barely in my late 20s, with a gaping hole in my heart and a tiny human who depended on me for everything. There were no handouts, no silver spoons, just me and a fierce determination to give my son a life better than anything I'd known. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3, to make ends meet. Mornings started before the sun, slinging hash and coffee at a diner down on Elm Street. The clatter of plates, the scent of frying bacon, the endless stream of faces. It was exhausting, but it paid the bills. Afternoons often found me on the factory floor, the rhythmic hum of machinery a constant companion as I packed widgets into boxes. My hands ached, my feet throbbed, but every dollar I earned was a brick laid in the foundation of David's future. I scrimped and saved every penny, tucked away in a dusty biscuit tin at the back of my cupboard. For years, that tin was my secret treasure chest, slowly filling with the promise of a home. I dreamt of a place with a small patch of grass where David could play, a place that truly belonged to us. It took me what felt like an eternity, but finally in my late 50s, after decades of sacrifice, I had enough. I bought a modest 2-bedroom house, nothing fancy, but it was ours. The day I got the keys, I remember walking through each empty room, tears blurring my vision. This was it. The culmination of a lifetime of hard work, a testament to my unwavering love for my son. When David met Sarah, I was overjoyed. He was so happy, and that's all I ever wanted for him. They decided to get married, and David, being the thoughtful son he was, wanted us all to live together. It made sense, he reasoned, with the extra room. I knew how much this house meant to me, but seeing the pure joy on David's face, I couldn't refuse. So, I gifted the house to him on paper anyway. My name, Evelyn Carter, quietly remained on the title deeds, a silent guardian in the background, a detail no one really discussed. It was a formality, I thought, a legal technicality. David and Sarah moved in, and our lives merged under one roof. For a while, things were peaceful. I loved having David close, seeing him every day. Sarah, my daughter-in-law, was reserved. She wasn't openly hostile, but there was a coolness about her, a polite distance that I never quite managed to bridge. We'd share a meal, exchange pleasantries, but there was no real warmth, no mother-daughter bond I'd secretly hoped for. Still, David was happy, and that was enough for me. My boy was my whole world, and as long as he was thriving, I was content to be a quiet presence in their lives, fading into the background if that's what it took to maintain the peace. The house hummed with the rhythm of our lives, a comfortable, if somewhat formal, existence. Then, without warning, the music stopped. David, my strong, vibrant David, was gone. A sudden, unexpected aneurysm. One moment he was there laughing, the next, he wasn't. The world went dark. My anchor, my reason for being, was ripped away. The house, once a sanctuary, now felt like a tomb, echoing with an unbearable silence. The world stopped spinning for me the day David left. After the funeral, a blur of mournful faces and whispered condolences, everything changed. The quiet distance Sarah had always maintained hardened into something cold and sharp. The house, once filled with the muted hum of our everyday lives, became a tomb of silence, punctuated only by Sarah's clipped responses and deliberate avoidance. There were no more shared meals, no gentle inquiries about my day. It felt as though David's passing had erased not only him but also my place within the very walls I had built. I tried, desperately, to hold on to some semblance of what we had. I'd wake in the mornings, the grief a heavy shroud, and attempt to resume my routines. I'd see Sarah struggling with laundry, piles of clothes overflowing the basket, and my maternal instincts would kick in. "Sarah, dear, let me help you with that." I'd offer, my voice soft, hoping for a sliver of connection, a shared moment of domesticity that might bridge the chasm growing between us. Her response was like a slap in the face. Her head would snap up, eyes narrowed, a muscle ticking in her jaw. "I don't need your help, Evelyn," she'd bite out, her voice laced with an irritation that stung more than any shout. "I can manage my own house." My own house. The words echoed in my mind, a cruel twist of irony. I'd retreat, my hands clenching, the unspoken pain a constant companion. It wasn't just the laundry. It was anything. If I offered to make a cup of tea, she'd refuse it. If I suggested cooking a simple dinner, she'd already have ordered takeout. Every gesture of care, every attempt to lessen her burden or simply connect, was met with a wall of icy disdain. The tension in the house grew thicker with each passing day, a suffocating blanket that pressed down on my spirit. I started spending more time in my room, a prisoner in my own home, the vibrant life I once knew slowly draining away. I barely saw Sarah, and when I did, her gaze would slide past me as if I were invisible, or worse, an unwelcome ghost. The air was heavy with unspoken resentment, a quiet bitterness that festered. Then came the day I knew deep down was inevitable. I was sitting in the living room, a book open on my lap, though I hadn't turned a page in an hour. Sarah walked in, her face set, her jaw tight. She didn't sit down. She just stood there, arms crossed, staring at me with an expression that was chillingly devoid of emotion. "Evelyn," she began, her voice low and even, utterly devoid of warmth. "This isn't working. You're a burden. I can't do this anymore. I don't need you here." Her words hung in the air, each one a nail hammered into my heart. "I need you to leave." My breath caught in my throat. I stared at her, utterly stunned. "Leave. From my home." The shock quickly morphed into a cold dread, but beneath it, a flicker of something else. A deep, quiet hurt that settled in my bones. I had given her a home, a family, and now she was casting me out like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. Before I could even formulate a coherent response, before the tears could fully well in my eyes, she pulled out her phone. My blood ran cold as I heard her calm, steady voice. "Yes, hello. I'd like to report a trespasser. My mother-in-law. She's refusing to leave my property." She gave the address, my address, with an unnerving precision. The police arrived within minutes. 2 young officers, looking uncomfortable but professional. Sarah stood by the door, her face impassive as she reiterated her claim. My heart pounded in my chest, a frantic drumbeat of humiliation and disbelief. Here I was, Evelyn Carter, a woman who had worked her fingers to the bone, who had built this very house brick by brick through sheer will, being accused of trespassing. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I didn't even cry, not then. My dignity, fragile as it was in that moment, was all I had left. I simply nodded, a silent acknowledgement of their presence, and turned to my room. My hands trembled as I packed, carefully folding the few clothes I would take, my mind reeling. Each item I placed in my worn suitcase felt like another piece of my shattered life. I picked up a small, framed photo of David, his smiling face looking back at me, and tucked it gently into my bag. As I walked out of that house, the same house where I had cradled David as a baby, where I had watched him take his first steps, where I had celebrated his triumphs and comforted his hurts, a profound sorrow washed over me. I walked past Sarah, who stood by the door, watching me go with an unreadable expression. I didn't look back. I raised that boy in this house. And now I was being thrown out like a stray dog with nowhere to go. The silence of the empty street felt deafening compared to the deafening silence I had just left behind. I found myself at a cheap motel, the kind with thin walls and the faint smell of stale cigarette smoke, a stark contrast to the familiar scent of my own home. My old friend Martha had offered her spare room, but I needed a moment to myself, to simply breathe and process the cruel reality of what had just happened. The fluorescent lights hummed above me, casting a harsh glow on the worn carpet. I sat on the edge of the bed, my small suitcase beside me, the framed photo of David clutched in my hand. The humiliation of being escorted out by police, the cold finality in Sarah's eyes. It all swirled in my head, a relentless torment. Hours passed, or maybe it was days. Time had lost all meaning. My mind, numbed by grief and betrayal, slowly began to clear, piece by agonizing piece. And then, like a small, persistent flicker in the darkness, a thought surfaced. A quiet, undeniable truth that had been buried beneath years of assumed understanding and unspoken agreements. She had no idea. That house was still mine. It wasn't a sudden revelation, but rather a slow, dawning realization, like watching a forgotten memory resurface from the depths of a dusty attic. I cast my mind back years ago to the day I bought the house. Every penny, every sacrifice had been poured into that down payment. When David and Sarah had married, and the conversation turned to the house, David, with his sweet, earnest nature, had insisted on handling the paperwork. He'd said something about putting their names on it for ease of future planning, and I, trusting him implicitly, hadn't given it a second thought. I loved my son, and I had truly intended for the house to be theirs, their family home. But I was a cautious woman, a single mother who had learned the hard way to always have a backup plan. And so, when David presented the transfer documents, I remembered asking about what it all meant. The solicitor, a kind old man named Mr. Henderson, had patiently explained the nuances. While David and Sarah would be listed, my name, Evelyn Carter, would remain legally attached as the primary owner, a safeguard he'd called it, given my original investment and the gift nature of the transfer. It wasn't a secret I had kept from David out of malice, but simply a fact that had never been brought up again, never discussed in the easy flow of family life. We all just assumed, I suppose, that the house was theirs, truly theirs, once they were married. I never imagined a scenario where such a detail would become so profoundly important. Now, sitting in that sterile motel room, the memory of Mr. Henderson's words was a lifeline. A quiet strength began to unfurl within me, a gentle defiance against the crushing weight of my recent past. My hands, still trembling slightly, found my phone. With a surprising steadiness, I searched for the number of my old realtor, a kind woman named Margaret who had helped me find that house all those years ago. The phone rang a few times before her warm voice answered. "Margaret Jenkins, how can I help you?" "Margaret, it's Evelyn Carter. I have a question about the house on Elmwood Drive." My voice was raspy, but the resolve was growing with each word. There was a slight pause. "Oh, Evelyn, how wonderful to hear from you. How are things?" I briefly, vaguely, explained the situation, glossing over the more painful details. "I just need to confirm something about the ownership, dear. After David and Sarah married." Margaret listened patiently, then her voice, firm and reassuring, confirmed what my memory had hinted at. "Evelyn, yes, I remember that transaction. You transferred partial rights to David and Sarah when they married, but your name, as the original buyer and primary contributor, remained as the main owner on the title. It was a common setup for family transfers to ensure your original investment was protected, especially as a gift. You're still the primary owner, ma'am." A breath I hadn't realized I was holding escaped me. It wasn't about bitterness, not entirely. It was about something far more fundamental, respect. I had given so much, loved so deeply, and I had been cast aside without a second thought. The house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was a symbol of my life's work, my sacrifices, my love for David. And now it represented my dignity. "Margaret," I said, my voice gaining strength, "I want to sell it." There was no hesitation in my voice, no anger, just a quiet, unshakable decision. It wasn't an act of revenge, not truly. It was an act of reclamation. I had given, and I had been dismissed. Now it was time to take back what was rightfully mine, not to hurt Sarah, but to heal myself. This house, the one she had so readily thrown me out of, was the key to rebuilding my shattered world. Margaret, my realtor, moved quickly and efficiently. Within days, an official notice was sent to the house on Elmwood Drive. It wasn't a handwritten letter or a phone call, but a stark, legal document, delivered by registered mail. It stated, in no uncertain terms, that the property was being listed for sale and that the current occupants would need to vacate by a specified date. I imagined Sarah opening that envelope, her fingers probably tearing at the seal, expecting something innocuous, perhaps a bill or a junk mail flyer. The thought, I admit, brought a flicker of grim satisfaction, but it was quickly replaced by a sense of resolute calm. This wasn't about vengeance, It was about dignity. The phone rang incessantly after that. 'Twas Sarah. Her number flashed on my screen again and again, but I let it ring. I was staying at Martha's now, the quiet comfort of her spare room a balm to my raw nerves. Martha, bless her heart, had simply held my hand and listened, offering solace without judgment. Sarah's voicemails, when I finally listened, were a mix of disbelief, fury, and outright panic. "How could you do this, Evelyn?" Her voice, usually so controlled, was shrill, laced with an anger I had never heard directed at me. "This is my home. My son's home. You can't just kick me out." She tried calling again, and this time I answered. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "Sarah," I said, my voice quiet, almost a whisper but firm. "I gave you a home and you showed me the door. I reckon it's my turn now." There was a stunned silence on the other end, then a sputtered, incoherent protest before I gently ended the call. There was nothing more to say. The conversation, if you could call it that, was over. The years of quiet resentment, the simmering anger that had finally boiled over, had come to this. It wasn't about being cruel. It was about the fundamental truth of respect. When someone casts you aside, when they disregard your very existence in a place you built with your own hands, there comes a point where you must reclaim your space, your worth. The sale process moved surprisingly fast. Margaret was excellent, handling every detail with a professionalism that was deeply reassuring. She found a buyer quickly, a young couple eager to start their own family, who saw the potential in the modest, well-loved house. I never met them, but Margaret spoke highly of their enthusiasm. The for sale sign went up in the front yard, a stark symbol of the shift in power, a quiet announcement to the neighborhood that things were changing. I imagined Sarah seeing it, the red and white sign a constant, unavoidable reminder of her choices. She had no recourse, no legal standing to fight it. The paperwork was clear, my name unassailable as the primary owner. The house was sold, the closing date set. Sarah was forced to move out, packing up her life from a home she believed was hers, a home I had freely given to my son, with a quiet understanding that I would always be part of its fabric. I didn't gloat. There was no triumphant feeling, no surge of vindictive joy. Instead, there was a profound sense of peace. It was a calm, steady emotion that settled deep within me, replacing the turmoil and the grief. The act of selling wasn't about hurting her. It was about healing myself. It was about standing up for myself, for the woman who had worked tirelessly, who had loved unconditionally, and who had been so easily discarded. "I didn't do it to hurt her," I confided in Martha one evening, sitting by her cozy fireplace. "I did it because I deserved respect. And because sometimes, the only way to get it is to make a stand." The house, once a symbol of my unconditional love, had become a lesson in boundaries, a painful but necessary step in my own journey of recovery. The sale wasn't an ending, but a new beginning, a quiet declaration that I was still here, still strong, and still worthy of dignity. The sale of the house brought more than just financial closure. It brought me freedom. With the funds, I found a delightful new place, a smaller, cozier apartment in a lovely retirement community not far from Martha. It's nothing like the house on Elmwood Drive, but it feels more like home than that house ever did in its final days. Here I'm Evelyn, a resident, a neighbor, not an unwanted burden. The staff are kind, the other residents welcoming, and for the first time in a long time I feel truly at peace. My days now unfold with a gentle rhythm, free from the silent tension that had suffocated me for so long. Mornings begin with a cup of tea on my small balcony, watching the sunrise paint the sky with soft pastels. The air is fresh, and the only sounds are the chirping of birds and the distant murmur of life beginning. My new living room is bright, filled with sunlight that streams through the large window, illuminating every corner with a warm, inviting glow. I've decorated it simply, but with things that truly mean something to me. My favorite armchair, worn smooth from years of use, sits by the window, perfect for reading. It's a chair that has witnessed countless moments of joy, sorrow, and quiet contemplation. Beside it, a small antique side table holds the most precious treasures. Photos. Dozens of them, capturing David's life from infancy to adulthood. There's one of him as a chubby-cheeked baby, his eyes wide with innocent wonder. Another shows him in his school uniform, a gap-toothed grin on his face, his bright eyes sparkling with mischief. And my absolute favorite, a candid shot of him laughing, his head thrown back, taken just a few months before he passed. His joy palpable even in a still image. These aren't just pictures. They are memories, testaments to a love that transcends loss, vibrant reminders of the immeasurable joy he brought into my life. Each photo tells a story, a chapter of a beautiful life, and I often find myself lost in them, a bittersweet smile playing on my lips. I often sit there sipping my tea, looking at those photos and reflecting on everything that happened. It wasn't an easy path, and the pain of losing David, and then the betrayal by Sarah, ran deep. The grief for David was a raw, visceral wound that still aches, but the sting of Sarah's actions has faded, replaced by a quiet understanding. But I survived. I found my footing again. It's a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, I suppose, that even after being knocked down so completely, you can find the strength to rise. Sometimes people forget where they came from. They forget the hands that helped them, the sacrifices made for them, the foundations laid with love and hard work. They take for granted the kindness extended, the home offered, the very presence of those who care. Sarah, in her grief and perhaps her own fear, lost sight of that. She saw me as an inconvenience, a lingering shadow, rather than the woman who had not only given her son life but had also provided the very roof over her head. But life, in its own way, has a profound and often humbling way of reminding them. It doesn't always happen with a bang, a dramatic confrontation, but sometimes it's a quiet shift, a gentle turn of the tables that shows them the true cost of their actions. It's a universal truth, I believe, that what you put out into the world often finds its way back to you. I don't harbor bitterness towards Sarah anymore. That emotion, I've found, is a heavy burden to carry, and I've carried enough weight for one lifetime. My focus isn't on her or what she lost, but on what I've gained. Peace, independence, and a renewed sense of self-worth. The house, in the end, wasn't just a dwelling. It became a profound teacher, a symbol of resilience. It taught me that even when everything seems to fall apart, even when you feel utterly alone and discarded, there's always a hidden strength within, a quiet power that can guide you through the darkest times. It showed me that my value wasn't tied to being needed by someone else, but inherent in who I am and what I have built. Now I look forward, not backward. My days are filled with new interests and genuine connections. I've joined a book club here in the community. We meet once a week, discussing everything from classic literature to modern thrillers, and the conversations are lively and intellectually stimulating. I've started tending a small herb garden on my patio, nurturing basil, mint, and rosemary, finding a quiet joy in watching new life spring forth. The earthy scent of the soil, the delicate green shoots, it all brings a simple, profound satisfaction. I've even reconnected with some old friends from my factory days, women with whom I shared so much laughter and struggle. We meet for coffee, reminiscing about the old times, sharing stories, and simply enjoying each other's company. These connections, these small daily joys, are what truly enrich my life now. Life, it turns out, has many more chapters to write. And this chapter in my new cozy apartment, surrounded by my memories and my blossoming friendships, feels like the beginning of my truest story yet. It's a story of a woman who, despite immense loss and betrayal, found her strength, reclaimed her dignity, and built a new, peaceful life for herself. It's a testament to the fact that endings can also be beautiful beginnings, and that sometimes the greatest acts of self-preservation can also be acts of profound grace. If you were in my shoes, after everything I went through, after being cast out of the home you built with your own two hands, would you have sold the house too? Looking back, it's funny how life unfolds, isn't it? The unexpected turns, the heart-wrenching losses, the moments of stark betrayal. But also, the quiet triumphs, the rediscovery of your own strength, and the peace that eventually settles over you like a warm blanket. My story isn't unique. I imagine many of you have faced your own storms. But if there's one thing I've learned, It's that even when the ground feels like it's crumbling beneath you, there's a foundation within you that can't be shaken. So, thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for walking alongside me through those tough times and sharing in this new chapter. Means more than you know. And remember, sometimes the greatest act of love we can show ourselves is setting boundaries, even if it means closing a door to open another. Take care, everyone. And don't forget to cherish those who truly cherish you.